Hello friends, welcome to the 7th session titled Infrastructure Financing. In the previous session we discussed conventional and innovative techniques of project management. In this session we would discuss infrastructure financing structure, characteristics of infrastructure financing from viewpoint of demand side and supply side, global infrastructure finances in terms of requirements and gap, and finally the options of infrastructure financing. By now we all know that infrastructure projects are highly capital intensive, requiring multiple sources of funding. These projects require long term low cost capital to generate required returns of say 12 to 15% for developers or sponsors. These projects have long gestation and life cycle like 20 to 30 years. Concessions or contracts are common in roads and power sector projects. These projects are mostly undertaken by special purpose vehicles or companies incorporated for developing a specific infrastructure project, and it involves inherent risks, uncertainties and externalities like political stability, regulatory risks, delayed land clearance, etc., culminating in cost overruns and negative impacts on returns. Hence, establishing bankability of an infrastructure project is a key challenge. Infrastructure project financing structure will be discussed in a flow chart in the presentation. However, in nutshell, it is as follows. The host government, guided by project agreement, will constitute special purpose vehicle. Sufficient funds are organized from the sponsors through stakeholder agreements and lenders through loan agreements apart from the seed money from government. Special purpose vehicle will get the project designed and built under construction contract, followed by providing the product to suppliers or services to users through supply or service agreements. Finally, special purpose vehicle will shortlist or identify company for the operation and management. Finally, special purpose vehicle will shortlist or identify company for the operation and maintenance of the project. To holistically appreciate the financing of infrastructure projects, we need to understand the characteristics of infrastructure financing from demand and supply perspectives. The stakeholders raising demand for finances are the special purpose vehicles or developers, while stakeholders providing or supplying finances are lenders like international financing institutions or banks. Demand side stakeholders would want that project finance should be such that it provides balance sheet insulation by transfer of risk to a project special purpose vehicle. They would prefer that project is constructed with lowest construction cost or by sharing of revenue like in case of road projects, and can opt for build, operate, transfer and engineering, procurement and construction models of public private partnership. They would try to organize senior debt and negotiate a financing structure with lenders. Supply side stakeholders, that is the lenders, would want that there is no mismatch of asset and liability. They would prefer that funds should not go in default mode during the construction phase. Throughout the project life cycle, there should not be any risk of cost overrun and cash flow volatility. Extensive due diligence or negotiations with multiple stakeholders are required. Numerous research studies and reports on infrastructure investment requirements have been conducted and produced by organizations, institutions. A couple of them would be shared. 2016 study by McKinsey Global Institute states that global infrastructure requirements as $69.4 trillion between 2017 and 2035, of which 54% would be required in Asia, and 8%, that is US$ 6 trillion, would be required in India. Spending gap would be USD 5.5 trillion, that is 0.3% of GDP over 2017 to 2035. Oxford Economics and Global Infrastructure Hub researched and produced an analytical tool titled Global Infrastructure Outlook 2017 that can be used by government, business and infrastructure organizations across the globe to comprehensively analyze and predict infrastructure investment requirements by 2040. The research covered 7 infrastructure sectors, namely roads including bridges, railways, airports, seaports, electricity, water and wastewater and telecommunications in 50 countries, which accounted for more than 85% of world GDP. Estimated global infrastructure investment of $94 trillion would be required during 2016-40, that is $3.7 trillion per year. It's 19% higher than would be required under current trends. To meet this need, world will need to increase the proportion of GDP it dedicates to infrastructure from 3%, which is expected under current trends, to 3.5%. Asia will continue to dominate global infrastructure market in the coming years, as it will account for 54% of global infrastructure investment needs to 2040, compared to that of 22% for the America, the next largest region. Just 4 countries, namely China, US, India and Japan, account for about 50% of global infrastructure investment requirements till 2040. Electricity and road together account for 66% of global infrastructure investment during 2016 to 2040. For meeting Sustainable Development Goals for universal access to drinking water, sanitation and electricity by 2030, increases global infrastructure need by further $3.5 trillion by 2030. As government resources would be insufficient to cover the gap, increased participation by domestic banking institutions like non-banking financial companies and infrastructure investment trusts would be required. With this, we come to an end of session 7.